All right, so welcome to another episode of Kaleo Conversations. And so we're just gonna jump into this. I'm here with Brockie Follette, who is, I don't want to mess up your title officially, but like the chair of the Department of Youth Ministry here at Barclay College, and also the chaplain, campus pastor. There you go, and pastor's wife of Haviland Friends. Lots of titles. But also, I'm sure many people know you used to be the program director at Kaleo Academy for many years. And so I just wanted to jump right into that right there. Basically, say you've been involved with Kaleo in many different roles. Obviously, used to be the program director. I've got on here. You've been a teacher. You were one of the teachers this last year, and maybe you've taught in years past. But been involved with teaching some of the classes at Kaleo. You've also been a parent of both a mentor and now a student. So a parent of kind of both of the roles that we have for students to be in part of. So for me, just kind of a general question as we get started. Do you have any standout memories? I'm sure you have many from your time with Kaleo, or any, yeah, just moments that stand out from your different roles that you've been involved.
Yeah, I have a lot of memories, great memories, but I tried to write down like maybe three or four that really stand out to me. The first day when we all come together, first official day of classes, we do biblical interpretation, and the students actually learn how to do inductive Bible study. And so in the afternoon, we actually send them out for, I think it's about 2 hours where they learn how to do that. They take different passages, and then we come back together, and they give us like the interpretation of what they've come to. And I think every year that they do that, like I just am brought to tears because it's so exciting to see them read the scriptures and like in new ways, like that their eyes have been opened to see things different, but also to realize that I think a title that Lily used to use a long time ago when they were giving these out is like a theologian in residence. And so that's kind of how I feel. And then they realize that it's attainable for them. So that's probably a huge highlight for me every year. Also, like the vocation and calling fair at the end of the week, we bring people together of all different kinds of vocations, ministry and non-ministry, and it's like speed dating where the students are at a table having conversations and they have to come up with their own questions. And I feel like a lot of those vocation and calling fairs that we've had have been like holy moments almost for some of our students and even mentors too, where they just have someone to ask questions and they discern and do some things. And I think I can remember one of my mentors, he was at the table with some law enforcement, like we have some highway patrolmen, and out of that conversation, like his eyes were really open to the amount of human trafficking or the drug that's going on just out here in Kansas, and then just listening to like some of the officers tell their stories, and really felt compelled that he wanted to go into prison ministry, like a chaplaincy. And then probably another one was a student who liked photography and thought, well, the only thing I can do with this is take family portraits. And then to have like the individual at his table who was fine arts talk about, hey, you should go on this website on Kansas and you can put your photos on there. Or have you ever thought about, doing things in nature, or just like how the ministry of taking photos of families. And so I think that's one of the things I love is to see how those organic conversations really flow. And then just the last thing I wrote down is we used to joke a lot. Katie and I did. She was, the assistant with me, and like we would say, how is this going to work? We're bringing all these people from all places into Kansas, and what a weird thing. And probably one of my favorite memories is the very first year we were here. Two of our mentors were older gentlemen. One of them was Latino, and the other one was from either in Bangladesh or Nepal. And so we were all at the pool just in the local town 10 miles away. And everybody was just laughing and having fun. And then the two of them were doing belly flop contests. And the students were cheering and chanting their names. And Katie and I just looked at each other and were like, that can only be God orchestrating that, because how could that happen? But just so many great memories for me. But those would be some that I would say are on the top of my list. So.
The next question is kind of similar, but as you've been involved and more involved with Kaleo from the very beginning and kind of getting it started, and then as you continue to see it working and doing its thing. What are some ways that you see Kaleo Academy contribute to shaping future leaders of the church? I know you touched on that a little bit, I think, but
So Jacob sent these questions to me ahead of time, so I had some time to think. And so I just wrote down, I think it's good for people to know all the ways that our former alumni are already participating in churches. So we have former alumni who are on church boards, they're on yearly meeting boards. Some of them are already serving as missionaries or are doing future missionary retreats. They're denominational camp directors at like junior high, high school, grade school level. They're on yearly meeting staffs. There's some around here that are doing pulpit supply for small rural churches on a regular basis. Business as mission. Some of our students have actually started their own businesses, and their goal is to make that be part of their lifestyle or their mission. Worship leaders in churches, youth pastors, youth volunteers. And I would say that how I see it shaping the future of the church is I think our students walk away from here because of not only their time here and their mentors and the assignments they do, but also because of that 9 month, 10-month connection afterwards. I think they see the value of being part of a local church, especially if their church has helped send them to be here. And then so many of the assignments we do help them to reach back into their church. And so I feel like they begin to understand that symbiotic relationship that they need the church and the church needs them. I mean, they understand the idea of being a part of the body of Christ even at a young age. They're beginning to see that, beginning to value some of the relationships there that maybe they haven't ever looked at before. I remember one of my favorite quotes by one of the girls was she said, I want to hang out with the older adults in my church. They're like, but don't make it weird, like a blind date. But I love that line. I think it's good. And then also she said, and we want them to be more than just people who write checks to us. Like, how can that be a deeper relationship? And I feel like they begin to understand, like Church Capital C, that God's design was that the church would be the megaphone to the world of His message. And so that's how I see them shaping, specifically the leadership of the Friends movement is in some of those capacities. So,
yeah, I'm always surprised. I mean, so the last two Kaleos I've really been like super involved in, but my wife was in the very first one with a student from our. So I've been, familiar with most of it. I'm surprised. I don't know why. I still am with who some of the mentors end up being, because they can pick their own mentor, and it's not always the youth pastor or someone like that. Like it's a wide range of ages and
yeah.
backgrounds and stuff.
Add to that, I can remember specifically we had a mentor who was college students from Barclay, and he's from like more of the inner city of Minnesota. And in his small group, he was really intentional with him that his group, but in his group, one of the mentors was a lady who was probably in her 70s and she was having knee problems. And I remember the last night, each of the groups, we call them hives, they do kind of their wrap up together and the last things that they want to tell each other. And their group was taking a really long time. And so I just went to go check on them. And as I went in, I just saw that all the students had they put her in the middle and they were laying hands on and praying over her. And for her, that week was really, she thought she came to be a mentor to the student. And actually she was really ministered to by them. Yeah.
Okay, so shifting a little bit to your new role as the department chair of youth ministry here at Barclay. How do you hope to incorporate some practical experience into the curriculum and program to ensure that students are prepared for real world ministry? So I just thought about this like as someone who was a youth ministry major at Barclay a long time ago. And I'm not trying to like throw shade at whoever. I actually really enjoyed the program and did that. But then as someone who was on staff at a church and for 10 years, there's a lot that I think happens in ministry that you may not even be able to actually prepare someone for, but I just think like, you know, what do you think about, or how do you think about preparing students for what they'll actually encounter in the ministry world versus like textbook type stuff? Yeah.
Well, I inherited the program, and so there's things that are all established. And my predecessor is Jesse Penna, and he actually started something called a youth ministry lab. And so each we meet about every 2 weeks, but everybody who is a youth ministry major or a minor, because they don't all have classes together the whole time, because you come in with a different cohort and all that. But we actually get together and we either pick a topic or we troubleshoot like things are doing. And my requirement for them as being youth ministry majors and minors is they have to be involved in a local ministry someplace. And I actually ask them to attend church on a regular basis as well, just so that they can be engaged with youth on a more, I don't know, an intentional level instead of just hit and miss. And so sometimes we pick a topic of the day, like I think one week, sometimes I let them choose it. Sometimes I come with my own. And like they wanted to talk about how do you handle parents. And then some of them who are older gave some of their own stories. And probably my favorite thing is when we troubleshoot problems, like they'll talk about, a junior higher that they're having a difficult time getting to quit talking. Then I just open it up to let them talk to each other about it. And I try to let them do that mostly. And at the end, sort of redirect based upon, my long-term experience. But most of the time, they get it right. I think they're pretty accurate on that. So that would be some way that I'm trying to give them the world experience. And then also, because of our major, and I think even the minor, they are required to do an internship of some kind. It has to be 6 to 8 weeks. And so I think that's really, really important. And then we also try to encourage them each summer to think about their job for the summer if they can go someplace and make money, because students need to pay their bills. We try to encourage them to go look for some kind of a youth ministry organization. That could be a camp, it could be a parachurch organization, it can be a church. And so that's some of the ways that I would say that we're gearing them for a real world ministry. And if you know me, my students will tell you this, but I just want to talk about the hot topics, and let's not pretend like they're not there. So in my class that I teach in the spring, it's called Youth Culture and Trends. And so the very first activity that we do of the whole semester is I take whatever's the top 10 song off a Billboard and I read the lyrics out loud. And sometimes they're like, Miss Brockie, please. Or I'll say, what is that word? And they're like, please don't look it up on your phone. But part of that is because I want us to be real with what's happening in our culture and not pretend like it doesn't exist. And so we talk about the same things that are hot topics in the world, and so trying to stay on, and that's what makes that class a challenge as a professor, is because you constantly, your material that you use from year to year changes and changes and changes. So I would say that that's a way that we're doing, trying to get them real world experience. And then also, I try to have like guest speakers come into our classroom who are youth pastors. And so they get to hear stories too from people. And that also helps them to build relationships with local youth pastors, so they can think about serving in those spaces as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I just, once again, not knocking, like I think it was good, but yeah, there's a lot different than like dream planning a church camp out and things like that versus actually doing it and then having to deal with the kid who messes it up because he wants attention for something or whatever.
I did remember this in our upper level youth ministry. It's called youth ministry programming. Our students actually do like a whole mock first year schedule. Like they come up with like, are you going to have a Sabbath day? They have to do a mock budget. They have to make a mock calendar so we tell them like, pretend like you're presenting this either at a parents meeting or you're presenting this to your board. And then we even, the whole first 2 weeks of that class, we just talk about soul care. like because there's so much youth pastor burnout. And so we talk a lot about like what is your intentional plan to be connected to the vine? What's your intentional plan to abide? And to make that a priority now, and to be thinking about how you could do that with accountability, with adults, with people your age or whatever. But that's something that we try to do is to and then they have that in a notebook form. I know that they should probably do that all on the computer, but which I tell them you can do it either way. You can create a notebook that way, but then they have that. And then all the resources from the semester go into there about how do you have a conversation with your church board? How do you have a conversation with your parents? How do you have a conversation with parents who aren't a part of your church? Those types of things, so fundraising, etc. So yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was, I think, just coming to my mind, thinking about like some of the hardest times or whatever when I was in youth ministry. It was more with parents than with, or just the situations that would make me nervous, like, oh, I could have a conversation with a kid about anything, but when I know I need to call so and so's mom about something, that's like, ooh, that just like, that was always harder. Okay. So once again, in the role as a department chair here, how do you support students in discerning their call to ministry? Maybe they come in thinking they want to do youth ministry and then they're unsure, or other way around, they're not sure what they want to do, but then they start maybe thinking maybe youth ministry. So how do you help them discern that call? And then especially considering like cultural and societal I put challenges or changes that are, facing youth today, like as they think about getting into that. I don't know if you walk alongside any people up with that.
So research repeatedly tells us over and over again that if that the way that a student or a young person, a youth or a young adult, either experiences a call, or a call is cultivated, or they begin that process of discerning, is through serving and leading. That the statistics are very high that if a person's going to end up going into a ministry field, it's most likely because they've been given opportunities when they were young to serve and to lead. And so that's like that real world experience. And so just ask them, have you ever felt like you have experienced a call to youth ministry? And it's funny because even when you ask adults that who are in youth ministry, some will say, no, I never heard this, but some are like, oh yeah, I can tell you where I was, who was the speaker, what was going on, or the place I was at, or, I was at Twin Rocks or wherever it might be. But I just always ask that just to see if that's something that's been going on. And then we just keep talking about that together. I think too that we often talk about, okay, so you feel like you have a sense of calling to something. Is there people who've helped confirm that or affirm that? Has there been scripture? Has there been experiences? Just those types of things, like what, because statistically, once again, I'll just say that those are the things that help that continuing to cultivate a call, is those people who have been involved in that. And so, yeah, I would say that that's how we spend time discerning their call together. And I wanted you to talk a little bit more about like when you're saying cultural and societal challenges youth are facing today. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking like, once again, statistics and research and whatever, we know and read that like youth today are just dealing with a lot more, and societal pressure, and I think like depression rates and suicide rates and all that kind of stuff. I'm just like, I think if I was, like a 19-year-old thinking about going into youth ministry today, it's a very different world than it was, even 12 years ago when I was getting started. And so I'm just like, I just didn't know if that really kind of flavors some of the stuff that you think about, or I'm sure it does with other people when they're trying to discern, like, is this something I want to get into? Because whether my head was in the sand or whatever, those weren't really things that I was thinking about, like getting into youth ministry when I started. Like, oh, I'm going to have to deal with kids who are depressed all the time and kids who are struggling with anxiety and whatever. That tide shifted, I think, a little bit while I was in youth ministry. But yeah, I think maybe that would just be a factor now as you think about like entering, and that's maybe not youth ministry specific. That's probably just working with kids in general, whether you're going to be a teacher or something. Like, I feel like some of the pressures facing teens today are a lot different. And so I just didn't know how that would maybe impact people as they think about going into that. Yeah.
I would say that probably actually equips them better. They're much better equipped because they've been living that themselves, those statistics. And they've also been living with their peers or walking alongside their peers. They're very familiar with all those things. And so, in some ways, they're ahead of me. It's a little harder for me to have to rearrange my brain and how I think about things and them. I mean, here as at the college as chaplain, I would say that if I have 4 students come to see me in my office, that probably 3 out of 4 are in anxiety medicine. It's just where we live. And so I feel like they have, this generation really has learned how to normalize some of those societal challenges that maybe the church doesn't want to talk about. And I remember this quote actually from Brad Mulder. He spoke at Summit maybe two times ago. He's from Fuller Youth Institute. He was part of the team that wrote Growing Young. And, he said people say to him all the time, well, youth today just have it harder. And he kind of paused and he's like, okay, so the draft, the world wars, the 60s. And his comment, he kind of stepped back and he said, I don't necessarily know that they have a harder life. He said, I think it's more complex. And so that's the hat that we really have to wear with our students, is thinking more on a complex level. And yeah, the complex lives of youth and young adults is just where they live. And I think I'm always giving you, this is just, I hopeful as examples, but in one of my classes this semester, we looked at an interview with a girl who was agnostic. And she, at 15 years old, started like a transition process to transition from female to male. And so this guy was interviewing her just like to hear her story. And one of the biggest things that she talked about was how, because she's in her 20s now and she's had an iPhone, she could actually go back and look at like her feed and all those things. And she had what's called like rapid onset gender dysphoria. Like it happened really fast. And she said, I went and looked at all the sites of the places that I was at, and everybody was talking about just all the things that I was interested in. She's like, do you know who was silent? Was the church wasn't talking about it at all. And so that's really where I'm at in this whole like cultural and societal changes is the church has to be like church capital C. We like when the kid asks that really awkward question, instead of just shutting it down because we don't know what to do with it, we just have to sit with it together and go, wow, that's a really great question. Can we think about it more this week? And then I want to talk more about that, or just having that one-on-one conversation with them. We should really be ahead of the game in these conversations, and oftentimes I feel like the church is behind. So
Okay, last question. And I didn't intend to like be maybe ending on a downer, so we'll see how this goes either way. But I'll just say from what I was thinking of, the question is, how do you see the role of youth ministry evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, broadly, just in general, but also within the Friends Church? And how can Kaleo and Barclay help prepare students for these ministry shifts? So, like a little bit of my thought process on this question and just like general observance, and maybe you can say I don't see that happening, but is just like I think I see less churches having like staffed youth pastors, at least like in a paid position. A lot of them I think are part-time, if that. And so I just wonder how maybe that factors into some of the thinking. And that's maybe, well, I was going to say that's maybe Friends Church specific, but actually that's probably across the board. So I don't know, like, as potentially it seems like that position is like not as much as a career maybe as what it maybe used to be a couple years ago. Like, I don't know what you think about that. How we prepare students for a position that maybe is kind of dwindling in a sense. I don't think it should be dwindling, but I think it is.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. if you look at national averages, like if you would go to a board that posts positions for ministry that's outside of Friends, there are youth pastor jobs everywhere. It's just like you have to, if you want a job in youth ministry, if a Friends church isn't available, there's a lot of people looking outside of that. I think I hear that quote often that it's dwindling, and I push back just a little bit on it because actually, like in our yearly meeting here in Mid America, we've actually had an upsurge of full time youth pastors or nearly full time youth pastors. Our yearly meeting just made a move, I think it was 2 years ago, to put our youth superintendent on to full time instead of part time. And so maybe some of that's my own context. I'm probably a little bit different in that way. I guess too, I'm a little older than you, and I'm probably older, might be older than your viewers, but we can play the age guessing game later. You can write that in the comment section or something. But I think that historically, young adults have always left the church. I mean, it's kind of normal, and that you would see that statistically, most of them, they come back when they get married and have kids. Well, part of it is in our culture today, less and less people are getting married. Actually, the divorce rate went down. In the last couple of years, it used to be 51% and it went to 49. And so like everybody's really excited about it, but the reality is less people are getting married. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I guess that I think that's always been happening. And to me, it's a little bit of who's controlling the narrative. If everybody's Debbie Downer about it, then that's how it's going to be. But I don't know if you've even picked up the new book by Fuller Youth Institute. It's Future Focus Church, and like they're talking about this upsurge. I mean, our local context here is really different. That most churches had problems after COVID of their numbers going down, and we actually increased in numbers. And the largest group that we have increasing at our church is young families. And so it may just be depending on your context and what narrative is out there. That's a little bit how I feel about that. In one of my classes, we've been reading a book called Hurt 2.0. It's by Chap Clark. It's a little bit older. It's maybe a book that's 10 years old, but he talks a lot about like how actually adults in our society, he calls it systemic abandonment. And basically the idea is that adults have become more self-focused. Adults have, because there's so much divorce, they're self-medicating. It's a lot about the self. And so communities or people used to help youth and young adults come to adulthood. That was like something we all did together. And because of the culture that we have, that's kind of changed. I mean, it's kind of a joke that he talks about how we used to all be front porch people. You'd be on your front porch saying hi to people who's walking by, not just in small towns, but now we become backyard people, that we're more enclosed. We're on our computers, we're on our phones, all those types of things. And so he just talks about how everybody needs to come together on that, and that coaches and schools need to quit using kids. Like coaches need to think about discipling, or if you're not a Christian, how do you take a young person and help invest in their life? That the goal isn't about I'm getting them 1,000, rebounds or 1,000 points. I'm trying to just help them to learn to be a team, or even educators not really using our kids just so they can get good test scores or whatever that might be to make their school look good. But how do we really think about investing in youth and young adults to get them to the other side? And he just talks about like those who are working with youth should always be trained in youth culture. They need to be up to date on what's happening. At those who serve adolescents have to work together instead of us competing against each other. How do we learn and not being siloed in the way we do that? Let's do that together more holistically. That those who serve adolescents must understand youth and provide boundaries. Actually, youth and young adults want boundaries. It's actually what helps them to succeed. And a lot of them, their parents didn't do that for them. And so that's why they need us to do that. We talk about sometimes at camps, how rules or whatever, it's because something's happened. And like Jesse Penn, I'll just go back to him. He always says, when we have to have a conversation about someone stepping outside the boundary of the rule or the regulation, it gives us access to them in a new way that we haven't had before. And parents need a lot of encouragement, but they need to be equipped, telling them not to give up. How do we help them? Parents really do need a lot. I'm saying that because I have, I've had 4 and I'm on my last one, and I'm a little older, and it's a lot harder than it was before. And that communities, it's the communities that need to make sure that each student has adult advocates. And so Fuller Youth Institute, once again, they go back to that number all the time. For every one youth or young adult to get them to the other side, they need 5 caring adults. And that we as a community should be thinking about how can we help them get to the other side of that. So that's kind of my response to just, what's going to happen in youth ministry. Now, here's where I'm going to step for Friends Churches a little bit. I would like to see us to get past that youth ministry as a stepping stone to another job in a church, to the senior pastor. I would like us to see that there are people who are called to youth ministry their whole life, whether they're paid or they're volunteer. There are people at churches who've been volunteers for years and they're great at it because they're called to that. I also think that we talk a lot about church growth. We talk about planting churches. I'm for that, but how can we be thinking about that with youth involved in that? I actually find that youth are great advocates for getting people to come on trips, to camp, and oftentimes if you get a kid to come to something, then their parents will follow because they see this transformation in their child. I would like to see our yearly meetings go back to maybe using some of their budgets to help churches hire. And what I mean by that is there a way to help a church begin to save money towards a youth pastor? Could they begin to do that over a period of time? And then maybe that first year that they hire a youth pastor, could the yearly meeting pay part of that budget? I mean, this is my experience actually of how I worked. The yearly meeting actually helped pay part of my salary for my first year, but the church fully knew that after that year was up, they were on their own with me, and then they could decide if they could afford it or not. And so I would love to see maybe us use some of those funds that way in our yearly meetings. Just an example here at Haviland Friends, when we were trying to decide if we could hire a full-time youth pastor, I don't know how we came to this, but it was if everyone, I think it was 20 families we needed who said they were giving regular tithe, but then they said that they would take and do 10% of whatever they were tithing. So if I'm regularly tithing $250 a month, then I'm going to add another 10% of that is $25. So my tithe is now $275. Yeah. And so that's how we paid for a youth pastor, just thinking outside of the box a little bit different. And I guess I just, want to remind people, they always say, well, youth are the church of the tomorrow. And they are, but they're also now. And I think it's a great investment. And I mean, there's no junior Holy Spirit, there's not a junior Holy Spirit. And we know that the way that they often will keep that momentum going is by leading and serving. And so what if you have a young kid who's really good at being social, help her be on the greeting team, or you have a kid, I think of an 8th grader we used to have here who, if he knew the church needed to be, the sidewalk needed to be shoveled off, he's there because of his relationship with the guy who did that, But it's just, to me, some of that, that I don't think we're the church. And this is my personal plug. We have people call all the time and ask us, do you have any youth pastors? I mean, I would say that we probably get, I probably get once a month, 2 or 3 requests. Do you have anybody who can fill these positions? And so when I came into this job, I came over 2 or 3 years ago, I had 2 youth ministry students. Now we have 11. And so I just keep telling people, can you wait? But I also want to say, come court our kids, come see who they are, come see their hearts and what they want to do. And I think that could be a really exciting venture together. Ask them to apply for internships you have. Even you say, well, we can't pay for internships. Hey, what if you could pay a little bit and then you had 10 families that said, we'll contribute this much so someone could come here. So I don't know. I'm always trying to think about how could we, maybe it isn't how it's always looked before. How could we think about it outside the box? Especially French churches. Sometimes there's some, like where I used to be a youth pastor, there was 3 in the area. And so could you share a youth pastor together? Something like that, just trying to think through some different ways of doing things. So but I would say, I probably feel like more than ever, we need youth pastors because of the societal changes and the things that are going on. So, and then, I'll just say that. I'll stop.
Yeah, I agree. As someone who was a youth pastor for a long time, well, 2 things you said resonate with me. One, I never felt the call. I still don't feel the call to be the lead pastor, you know, and people would ask me all the time at the church and things like that. When are you going to go up there? And when are you? And I was like, I just, yeah, I have no, this isn't a stepping stone for me to get to something else. Um, but also, yeah, I agree. Like we do need it. And, yeah, some of those ideas, like I did an internship, when I was a student here and, um, they paid, I mean, for a college student, I thought it was great. I'm sure now I would be like, whatever, but, they gave free housing for the summer. And so it's like, you know, they were very upfront being like, here's what you're going to make. But and they lined up that the families that we stayed with would provide meals for us, and so it's like you don't have to pay for housing, you don't have to pay for meals while you're here, you don't have to do this. So literally, all the money you make is like take home pay for you. And I was like, okay, well that makes it worth it then. Oh yeah, yeah. Now, yeah, that'd be crazy. Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks, Brocky. Thanks for joining. And we'll post this here. And people, like she said, you could guess her age in the comments, or you could comment about other things that we talked about. But yeah, thanks for having the conversation about Kaleo and youth ministry here at Barclay.
I'll just wrap up and say that I'm still really excited that Cleo's moving, and I know that you guys are kind of pivoting and shifting. You know, seeing, dreaming a little bit, seeing where we're going to head, and fully support you. Barkley has your support here. We're excited about what you're doing, and just look forward to good things. I was telling Jacob that so I'm excited. We have coming in the fall here. I have five former Kaleo students. That's the most we've ever had come in one semester, and so that's exciting for me to think that maybe God's already stirring some of these things up in their hearts. So it's good stuff. So yeah. So thanks for asking.
Thought like, oh, post COVID, that'll go away, things will get back to normal. And what's happened is some of the more recent data that's come out, like things are actually getting even more challenging. You're seeing more pastors who are exhausted, feeling stressed, feeling like we're just in a sense of polarized world, and it is hard to move through there. So that would be another one. The median size of church